Beneath the Lanna Sky, Season 3, Episode 1, Return to the Roots. The tamarind tree had grown wider, its branches curled like open arms over the old stone bench where Marco used to sit. A new plaque had been added, carved in both Thai and German, to those who cross oceans, only to find home in a garden. It had been 2 years since Marco's passing, and though time had moved forward, the resort remained much the same, rooted in tradition, now more serene than ever. Tara returned from Chiang Mai with a group of international students, bright, hopeful, endlessly curious. She was now a lecturer in cultural anthropology and heritage practice. This was her first field excursion as a lead instructor. Mayuree met her at the garden gate, arms open. They embraced in silence, the kind of embrace that heals across time. Lek walked out from the kitchen, dust on her pants and a pen tucked behind her ear. She smiled but didn't hug. Instead, she said, "You're late." The peacocks were waiting. The students were wide-eyed with wonder. They listened to Tara translate the history of the tamarind tree, the rituals of tying white threads, the meaning of the rice offerings. But it wasn't just a tour. Tara had returned with a purpose. She wanted to co-create a community-led exhibition, based on the untold oral histories of Lampun, women's stories, migration tales, mixed heritage families. And she wanted to begin with her own. That evening, after the students had settled into the cottages, the 3 women sat around the dinner table for the first time in months. Mayuree served sticky rice, tamarind stew, and fermented fish, her comfort food. Tara brought wine from Chiang Mai. Lek brought silence, which said more than words. They ate slowly. No phones. No rush, and in a quiet moment, Tara said, "I want to document our family story. All of it. For the archive." Mayuree nodded gently. "Then you'll need to ask questions I've never answered." Lek didn't respond. She stood, took her bowl to the sink, and disappeared into the garden. Later that night, Tara found Lek under the tamarind tree, sketching on her tablet. "You okay?" Tara asked. "You're turning our lives into research," Lek said flatly. Tara sat beside her. "I'm trying to preserve something before it disappears." "And if it's not yours to preserve?" Silence, then Tara whispered, "It's ours." The next morning, an email arrived. It was from a European travel agency, interested in booking the entire resort for 6 weeks for a retreat. They offered a sum large enough to rebuild all the aging infrastructure, but their request was clear: modernize the space. Remove local clutter. Add minimalist furnishings. Turn the tamarind tree area into a yoga deck. Lek looked at the email for a long time, then forwarded it to Tara and Mayuree with a single subject line. What would Dad have done? Season 3, Episode 2, The Price of Preservation. The morning air carried tension. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it hovered, in the way Mayuree stirred her tea too long, the way Tara double-checked her notes for class, and the way Lek hadn't responded to a single text message since sending the email. The travel agency offer had fractured their peace. 6 weeks of steady income. Enough to renovate. Enough to hire permanent staff. But at the cost of soul. The clients wanted clean lines, neutral tones, yoga mats instead of bamboo mats, Scandinavian chairs instead of woven stools, and worst of all, they wanted the tamarind tree space turned into a Zen deck. In the kitchen, Mayuree finally broke the silence. "Money is a tool, not a map." Tara looked up from her tea. "But tools build futures, Ma." Mayuree nodded. "Yes. But not all futures are worth building." That afternoon, Tara began her first official interview with Mayuree. For the oral history archive, they sat under the shade of the jackfruit tree, a quieter spot than the tamarind. Tara turned on the recorder and asked softly, when did you first know Appa was serious about staying? Mayuri smiled. When he bought a lawnmower he didn't know how to use. They both laughed, briefly. Then the quiet returned. Was there ever a moment, Tara continued, when you thought he wouldn't stay? Mayuri didn't answer right away. Her fingers twisted a flower stem. Yes. Many moments. But love is like water, not stone. It flows around fear. Tara wrote that down carefully. Meanwhile, Lex stood alone in the pavilion, the very space they wanted to gut. She imagined the polished wood, the minimal lighting, the glass railings. It would be beautiful, but sterile. Like something built for someone else. As she stood there, a voice called out from the path, "Excuse me. Is this the Lanna Heritage Resort?" She turned. A man in his 30s approached. Tall, thoughtful eyes, camera slung around his shoulder. Dust on his shoes. "I'm Jules. Architect from Geneva. Here for the retreat site review." Lex's face tightened. "Already?" "They booked me a week early. Said the owner would show me the grounds." She crossed her arms. "Well, the owner is still deciding if she wants to destroy them." He laughed, caught off guard. "Fair. I'd like to see them anyway, before the renderings erase their memory." That made her pause, and for the first time in weeks. She nodded. That evening, Tara found Lek on the balcony, flipping through Jules's sketches. "You're actually considering it?" "I'm considering some of it." He sees value in preserving local structures. He's not like the agency. But he's still a designer. He'll still push change. Lek looked up. "So will you? With your research? With your students? With your archive?" Tara went quiet. Lek added, "We all want to preserve things. But none of us agree on what preservation actually means." Inside the house, Mayuri read the email again. She looked at the zeros. She looked at the words: complete property overhaul, simplified aesthetics, Zen fusion design. She closed her laptop and reached for a photo. Marco smiling beside the newly built peacock pen, a hammer still in hand. She touched his face. "You never wanted perfect," she whispered. "You wanted honest." The next morning, she gathered Tara and Lek. No speeches. Just a sheet of paper. On it, her decision: they would not accept the agency offer. But they would apply for a cultural preservation grant, one that required public engagement, storytelling, and continued use of traditional materials. A harder path. A slower path, but one that belonged to them. Jules stayed an extra week, not to pitch designs, but to learn. He asked Mayuri to teach him how to weed banana leaf trays. He followed Lek with a camera, documenting her restoration work, and one evening, over rice wine, he asked if she would ever consider a collaboration, a project built on respect, not replacement. She didn't answer. But she poured him a second glass. Tara submitted her first story to the Chiang Mai Cultural Journal that week. Title: Beneath the Tamarind, How One Family Preserved Heritage Without Sacrificing Soul. Season 3, Episode 3, Echoes of the Father. The letter arrived without warning. A white envelope, foreign stamps, the handwriting elegant and unfamiliar. It was addressed simply to Ms. Tara Muller Mayuree, Lamphun, Thailand. Tara turned it over in her hands. The return address: a town in northern Switzerland. From a name she'd never heard, Elaine Bruckner, she opened it in the quiet of her mother's study. Inside, a short note: "I am the sister of your father, Marco. We lost touch many years ago. His last letter to me mentioned you and your sister, and the home he had built. I wish to connect, if only to fill the silence between us." There was no guilt. No grand declarations. Just honesty, and an invitation to meet, if Tara ever returned to Europe. She held the letter in her lap for a long time. When she finally told Mayuree, her mother simply nodded. She was his only sibling. He wrote to her, even when he stopped writing to his own father. Tara frowned. Why didn't he ever tell us? Mayuree smiled softly. He believed in starting from where your feet stand, not from where your blood begins. That night, Tara dreamed of Switzerland, but not the version she'd seen during her academic travels. She dreamed of fog over green hills, a child playing with a wooden train set. And Marco, younger, looking over his shoulder as if searching for something he'd forgotten to carry with him. She woke with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, Lek had begun meeting Jules more often. Their design talks became long walks through the orchards, or shared lunches of som tam and French cheese. He showed her his sketches, soft pencil lines merging Lanna motifs with structural minimalism. I'm not here to modernize, he said one evening. I'm here to listen. And maybe to stay longer than planned. Lek raised an eyebrow. You fall in love with every village you sketch? He smiled. Just this one. She rolled her eyes, but didn't look away. At the resort, renovations had begun, slow, respectful, guided by tradition. Mayuree oversaw every detail. Local craftsmen were hired. Lek worked side by side with them, barefoot in the mud, measuring teak beams with Marco's old tools. One afternoon, she found a small carved figure buried behind a wooden post, an elephant, rough-hewn, with initials carved in German. She cleaned it gently and placed it in the family altar. No one asked where it came from. But everyone knew. Tara began planning a trip back to Switzerland, not for escape, but for understanding. She wanted to meet Elaine. To ask questions. To trace the roots that Marco had left behind, but she hesitated. Not because of fear, but because she didn't know if knowing more would change how she felt about her father. Mayuree said something that surprised her. Go. Because love can survive mystery, but it grows with truth. As Tara booked her flight, Lek watched from the garden gate. You're really going? Just a few weeks. Maybe less. Don't bring back anything made of glass. Tara smiled. I'll bring back stories. And Jules, he stayed, applied for a 6-month working residency in Chiang Mai. Said it was for a research project. But everyone at the resort knew the real reason. Lek pretended not to, until the day he stood beside her in the half-finished pavilion and said, I came to help you preserve a building. But I think I want to build something else. With you. She looked at him, heart pounding, throat dry, then start with trust. That evening, the tamarind tree swayed gently in the wind. Mayuree sat alone beneath it, watching her daughters move in opposite directions, one to Europe, one into partnership, and felt the ache of distance and the joy of growth. She closed her eyes and whispered into the breeze, Marco. They're doing it. Not your way. Not my way. Their way. And the wind, warm and slow, answered without words. Season 3, Episode 4, The Crossroads. Tara stepped onto Swiss soil with a strange ache in her chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't longing. It was weight. The weight of a history she hadn't lived but somehow carried. Elaine met her at the train station in Winterthur, a tall woman with silver hair braided down her back, holding a blue umbrella even though the sky was clear. They didn't hug immediately. Just looked at each other, measuring familiarity in silence. You have his eyes, Elaine said gently, and your mother's calm. Over the next week, Elaine opened her home, her photo albums, and eventually, her memory. She spoke of Marco as a restless boy. a quiet rebel. The child who asked too many questions at the dinner table. The teenager who left one winter morning with a backpack and never looked back. He was searching for stillness, she said one night, holding an old postcard from Lampun. He said your mother gave him that. Tara listened, sometimes with tears, sometimes with laughter, but the story that stayed with her most wasn't about her father's leaving. It was about the year he almost returned, when their own father had fallen ill, and Marco wrote a letter saying he was coming home. He never did. He couldn't face the guilt, Elaine said. He had already planted roots somewhere else. Tara stood by the window that night, snow beginning to fall, and she understood something she hadn't before. Her father hadn't abandoned his past. He had traded survival for reinvention. Back in Lampun, the tamarind tree stood bare. The dry season had stripped its leaves. Dust settled gently on the walkways, and the air was thick with stillness. Mayuree had taken on a young apprentice, Molly, a 19-year-old from the village who showed great talent in floral design. Each afternoon, they walked through the market together. Mayuree explained the difference between ceremonial jasmine and garden jasmine, how to fold banana leaves without tearing the veins. The flower must breathe, she would say, like all things meant to last. She saw a piece of herself in Molly. But she also saw the future, bold, curious, unburdened. Lek had her own challenge. She had been invited to speak at a heritage preservation panel in Chiang Mai. Academics, city planners, NGO directors. It would be her first time speaking in public, not just as Marco's daughter or Mayuree's helper, but as the resort's next leader. She almost said no, but Jules, ever patient, encouraged her. The way you tell a story, he said, makes people want to stay. She wore her simplest outfit, a cotton blouse and hand-dyed skirt. No PowerPoint. No script, and when she stepped on stage, she spoke not of tourism or numbers, but of memory. Preservation is not about freezing time, she said. It's about planting something that continues to grow, even if we never see the flowers. She received a standing ovation, but more than that, she received offers, consulting, collaborations, even a grant to expand the resort as a living heritage model. It was everything they once dreamed of, and now she wasn't sure she wanted it. When Tara returned home, she brought Elaine's gift, a framed photograph of young Marco building his first workshop in Switzerland. Before Lampun was even a thought in his heart, she placed it beside his altar. Mayuree stared at it for a long time. He looked so serious, she said. He hadn't found joy yet, Tara replied, but he would. That night, the family gathered under the leafless tamarind tree. Lek told them about the expansion offer. Tara shared what she'd learned from Elaine. Mayuree said nothing for a long time, then she simply asked, if we grow, do we lose our shape? No one answered, because they didn't know, but somewhere in the stillness of that night, beneath a sky with no stars and no storms, a decision began to take root. Clapperboard Beneath the Lanna Sky, Season 3, Episode 5, Tensions and Tendrils. The sunflowers behind the resort began to lean, not because of drought or wind, but because time had passed, and nothing stands upright forever. Mayuree felt that too. It started as dizziness, then fatigue, then a fainting spell in the market, halfway between the incense stall and the mango cart. When she awoke in the clinic, her first words were, "Tell Lek not to overwater the orchids." The doctor smiled. But the diagnosis wasn't light, it wasn't critical. But it was serious. She needed rest, less stress, and a decision about treatment. Back at the resort, Lek took charge, silently, fiercely, with a tight jaw and tighter schedule. She ran the kitchen, managed the bookings, trained the new staff, and kept guests from noticing that anything had changed. But everything had, especially her. She stopped sketching. Stopped seeing jewels. Stopped smiling. Tara noticed, but didn't push. She'd seen this version of her sister before, after Marco's death. The silent soldier. The fixer. So instead of confrontation, she left a note in Lex's office drawer: "You're not a structure. You're a garden. And gardens need tending too." Jules, meanwhile, was offered a job in Portugal, a long-term design lead for a coastal restoration project, a dream role, he told Lek in the early evening, while they sat near the empty yoga platform, the one no one had agreed to renovate yet. "It's a good offer," he said, "not as poetic as here. But stable. Clean. Safe." She didn't look at him, so go. He waited. "Is that what you want?" She still didn't meet his eyes. "I don't want to need anyone who can leave." And that was the last time they spoke for a week. Tara began writing again, but not a thesis. Not a journal article, a novel, a fictionalized version of their story, with different names, a fictional country, and a woman who plants a tamarind tree after losing a man from the mountains. It wasn't academic, but it felt true. She showed the first chapter to Mayuree. Her mother read it in silence. Then said, "This is not my story." "I know," Tara replied. "It's mine." Molly, the apprentice, had an idea. She had grown confident over the weeks, not just in design, but in understanding guests. One evening, as they arranged lanterns for a ceremony, she told Mayuree, "What if we created a program for the guests, not just to see Lanna culture, but to make it with us?" Mayuree looked intrigued. "Like a workshop?" "No, like a season. One where they help plant herbs, weave garlands, learn music, cook in the old style, live it. Not observe it." It was bold. Ambitious. Logistically chaotic, but it sparked something, not just in Mayuree, but in Tara. And even Lek. 3 days later, Mayuree gathered her daughters under the tamarind tree. Her voice was soft. "But not fragile. If I go through with treatment, I'll need to leave for a while. Chiang Mai. Maybe Bangkok." "Then we'll come with you," Tara said immediately. Mayuree smiled. "No. This land is growing. It needs you both here. Especially now." She paused, then added, "But before I go, let's plant something. Together." And so, the next morning, beneath a cloudy sky, the family planted 3 new tamarind saplings along the southern edge of the garden, one for Tara's words, one for Lek's work, one for Mayuree's rest, and as they pressed their hands into the soil, Jules stood at a distance, watching, uncertain, still deciding. He hadn't left yet, but he hadn't said he'd stay. Season 3, Episode 6, Season of Becoming. The first guests for the new Lanna living season arrived on the first day of the rains. 3 couples, one from Amsterdam, one from Tokyo, and one from New Zealand. Each had signed up not just to stay, but to leave the rhythm of the village. They were given woven tunics, not robes. Bamboo baskets, not plastic water bottles. A daily schedule of weaving, planting, morning prayers, and fire-lit cooking. Tara watched them from the veranda, half excited, half worried. "Are we offering magic?" she asked. "Or a mirror?" Lek answered from behind her, holding a tray of herbal tea. "Both. If they're willing to see it." Molly led the opening circle beneath the lanterns. Her voice, once shaky, now held quiet power. She explained the symbolism of white thread bracelets, of jasmine water, of the bell chimes strung in tamarind trees, and when a guest asked, "Is this religion or culture?" she smiled and replied, "It is remembrance." Later that night, Tara wrote the word down in her notebook. not for her novel. For herself, in Bangkok, Mayuree began her treatment. It was not easy, the days were long, the fatigue deep. But she made friends in the ward, a retired dancer, a monk with lung trouble, a young woman battling a second round of cancer. She brought her sketchbook and filled it with drawings of the garden back home, peacocks with golden tails, Tara's notebook scattered on a mat, Lek's hands covered in turmeric. She mailed each sketch back to the resort. One by one, they arrived folded, scented with lemongrass, sometimes with little notes. Tell Molly not to forget the basil by the west wall. Tamarind leaves are falling early this year. Your father would have complained about the humidity. The drawings became their own thread, connecting her to what she had planted, and to what was still growing. Meanwhile, Jules made his decision, but Lek beat him to it. They met near the lantern station one dusky evening. The air was thick with summer mist. I'm not asking you to stay, she said before he could speak. I wasn't going to, he replied, I'm choosing to. She didn't answer immediately. Then stop walking like you're ready to leave, she said, handing him a linen shirt made by one of the village women. Start living like you've arrived. He put it on right there, barefoot in the mud, and they both laughed. For the first time in weeks, Tara's book was halfway finished when an email arrived from a Western publisher. They loved her voice. Loved the cultural backdrop. Loved the East meets West tension. Wanted to shape it for international audiences. They offered a generous advance, but they also had notes. Could the mother character be more mystical? Could the father's death have more drama? Could the rural setting be portrayed with more struggle? Tara stared at the screen, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. She closed the laptop and went for a walk. That night, under the returning stars, the three sisters, for Molly had somehow become one, sat around the tamarind altar. Tara read from her chapter aloud. Lek corrected a word in the Lanna proverb. Molly passed around grilled bananas. No one asked where Mayuree was, because she was everywhere, in the breeze, in the stillness, in the way they remembered to tend what mattered. Season 3, Episode 7, Between Worlds. Tara rewrote the same sentence 6 times. She had returned the publisher's feedback with a thank you. No edits. No drama. Just a quiet refusal. Now, every time she opened her manuscript, the words stared back, daring her to doubt. Was she being principled, or just scared? Late that night, she walked the garden paths barefoot, under a moon like brushed silver. By the well, she saw Molly lighting an incense stick, whispering a prayer. For your mother? Tara asked. For mine, Molly said softly. She hadn't spoken much about her family, but now, under starlight, she opened a corner of herself. My mother worked in Bangkok hotels. Disappeared when I was 12. No goodbye. Just silence. I came here hoping to forget. But I remembered instead. Tara didn't reply. She just sat beside her. 2 daughters of absence. 2 women building from broken roots. Mayuree returned 2 days later. She looked smaller, but brighter, like something trimmed to regrow. She walked the garden slowly, touching every post, every leaf, as if greeting old friends. The staff wept quietly. Guests bowed their heads. Molly froze mid-flower arrangement and cried openly in the kitchen. Mayuree embraced her. You kept the spirit alive. Now let's grow it together. Jules had a plan, not to leave. Not to renovate, but to expand, sideways. He proposed creating an artist-in-residence program, hosted in a neighboring field, separate from the resort's core. We invite Lanna painters, dancers, writers, even potters from abroad. They stay, they learn, they give back. We don't just show culture, we let it breathe. Mayuree loved it. Lek hesitated. More people means more stress. More loss of control. Or more connection, Jules said. We don't lose anything if we build something that honors what's here. Later that night, Lex stood under the tamarind tree alone. She remembered her father's hands shaping a clay Buddha, her mother weaving garlands at dawn, Tara writing stories no one asked for, Molly singing while sweeping petals. The family hadn't lost their shape, they had stretched. Tara received another letter. Not from a publisher, but from a girl in New York who had read one of her earlier essays. You wrote about identity like it wasn't a curse or a costume. It made me feel less strange. Tara read it 3 times, then she knew she would self-publish. Not because the world didn't want her story, but because she wanted it to stay hers. A week before the next monsoon season, the family held a blessing for the new artist field. Villagers came. Former guests returned. Even a monk who had once ordered business cards showed up with a shy smile. They tied white thread bracelets around each other's wrists, and when it was Mayuree's turn to speak, she held Molly's hand. This land gave me my family, she said, and now my family gives it back to the land. As night fell, fireflies blinked through banana leaves. Tara lit one lantern for her father. Lek lit another for their future. Molly lit one for her missing mother, and Jules, quiet as ever, stood beside Lek and whispered, "When you're ready. I want to stay longer. Not just as a visitor." She didn't look at him, but she reached for his hand. Yes, 8, ChatGPT said. Here is the heartfelt finale of Beneath the Lanna Sky, Season 3, where every thread weaves into a tapestry of heritage, healing, and home. Season 3, Episode 8, The New Roots. The invitations were handmade, pressed flower petals, strands of golden thread, hand-stamped letters in both Thai and German. They were not mass-printed. They were not sent digitally. They were delivered by hand, sometimes by motorbike, sometimes by birdcage truck. Because this wedding was not a performance, it was a promise. Lek and Jules stood at the center of the garden. Under the archway of 2 intertwined tamarind trees, there were no elephants. No fireworks. Just soft music played on wooden flutes, and family seated on grass mats. Mayuree watched from her seat, not as the host, but as a guest. For the first time in years, her hands held no clipboard. Tara gave a quiet blessing. Not in Sanskrit. Not in English. But in her own words, drawn from the pages of her nearly finished novel. Some roots grow downward. Others grow toward each other. What matters most is not the direction, but the connection. Jules wore a simple cotton shirt, dyed with indigo. Lek wore a Lana silk blouse and a single white jasmine in her hair. Her only jewelry, her father's old watch. Cleaned and polished, they didn't exchange vows, they exchanged promises, spoken softly, heard only by each other and the soil beneath their bare feet. Molly stood nearby, holding a tray of flower water. She had received news just days before, a full scholarship to study environmental design in Japan. She hadn't told anyone yet, not because she wasn't proud, but because she didn't want to leave before things felt complete. Later that night, Mayuree found her arranging candles along the stone wall. "You're not leaving anything behind," Mayuree said softly, "you're carrying us forward." Molly wept. Not out of sadness, but gratitude. "You were the mother I didn't know I needed." Mayuree embraced her. "And you were the daughter I never expected." The next morning, the peacocks called loudly, as if blessing the beginning of something new. Tara sent her manuscript to print. Lek and Jules prepared to launch the artist field project. Molly began learning Japanese. Mayuree officially retired from management, handing over the ledgers, the keys, and the old garden scissors. She took her seat by the tamarind trees, with tea and a book and the slow rhythm of a life well lived. Guests continued to arrive, not just for weddings, but for stillness. Artists came to paint rice fields at dawn. Poets came to write beneath the mango trees. Students came to learn the rhythm of incense and lotus folding. No one came for luxury, they came for meaning, and on one particularly golden afternoon, Elaine, Marco's sister, arrived from Switzerland, finally fulfilling her promise to see what her brother had built. She didn't say much at first, she just walked the gardens, pausing at the tamarind tree where his ashes were scattered years ago. Then, as Tara handed her a cup of herbal tea, she said, "He never truly left home. He simply planted a new one." That evening, Mayuree lit one final lantern, not for the past, but for the seed of tomorrow.